Hello everyone and welcome back to Towergate. It is day 150, Wednesday, August the 2nd. I'm sorry, it's August now. August the 2nd, 2017. It is a Wednesday, hump day. Well, got some good stuff for you today, but before I get into it, just wanted to comment on one thing. As most of you know, I've mentioned that in the office I work in, they keep talk radio on and listen to it kind of in the background. And I was caught an interview this morning with Lindsey Graham on the Hugh Hewitt show. Hugh Hewitt is, of course, a establishment Republican neocon type. So him and Lindsey Graham would get along very well. And they spent about half their time talking about the Russia, the investigation, the dossier, and all that. And then they spent some time talking about North Korea. So first, on the dossier thing, it's kind of interesting listening to Lindsey Graham. He's going off talking about, that the Russians may have been behind it and all these other things. But one thing he failed to mention at any time during the interview was the fact that it was his best friend in the Senate, in the Congress, Senator Magoo. That's Lindsey Graham's best buddy. He failed to mention at any time during the interview with Hugh Hewitt that Senator Magoo was the man who went and got the dossier, or sent his right-hand man to go get the dossier so that he could give it to Comey in hopes that he could destroy the president, Trump. He doesn't mention that in the interview. And it got me to thinking, if they're pushing for this investigation into the dossier, who created it, who funded it, who paid for it, who leaked it, and all these things, and they're also wanting to look into all the leakers and punish the leakers and all this type of stuff, how do they actually broach either of these topics without stumbling onto John McCain? Because it's Senator Magoo who is the one who actually went and got the dossier and gave it to Comey and got the ball rolling. We also can speculate, we don't have proof, but we can speculate, and it is the opinion based on court documents from Christopher Steele and his attorneys, that it was Senator Magoo that leaked the dossier to BuzzFeed as well as other news organizations. We also know that McCain recently has been leaking a lot of things, including some things that he could have only known if he was given information about the phone call between Trump and Putin. And this is how they know that there's something fishy going on. So I guess the thought that crossed my mind is that if they do get this special prosecutor or whatever that they're pushing for, and he does decide he's going to try to get to the truth, get to the bottom of things, it will be impossible to get to the bottom of the dossier or the bottom of the leaking without crossing paths with Senator Magoo. He's caught up in all of it up to his eyeballs. How are you going to approach this investigation without somehow... How are you going to do it and at the same time try to leave Senator Magoo out of it? It's just impossible. Magoo is into this thing up to his eyeballs, and if you're going to investigate these things, John McCain is going to come into the equation. There's no way to have this investigation and not have Senator Magoo come into the equation. He's at the root of all of it. He's at the root of the leaking. He is at the root of the dossier and probably the proliferation of the dossier to these media organizations. It also is, in my opinion, that he probably shared this information of the dossier, maybe the entire dossier itself, with Harry Reid and other people on the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Gang of Eight, that McCain is a part of. So it was just interesting listening to Lindsey Graham as he was talking about this and never once mentioned his good buddy, Senator Magoo, despite the fact that Magoo is a critical part of the entire thing. So this will be an interesting thing to watch as this moves forward. If they do succeed in getting a special counsel to investigate the dossier and the leaking and all this, it'll be interesting to see how they go about doing that without without including Senator Magoo into that. I would have to think they would at the very least have to interview him. And I would think at this point, one question he certainly needs to be asked is who he shared the dossier with besides Comey. We know he's the one that shared it with Comey. We don't know who else he shared it with. And that's a question he certainly needs to be asked. And it's funny that Even as John McCain is going through his therapy, his cancer therapy at the Mayo Clinic, he's not at the VA. He's going through his stuff there with his cancer at the Mayo Clinic, and in between treatments, he's tweeting out things and leaking things and doing the same thing he always does. I mean, he hasn't stopped or backed off at all. So it just, I thought it was kind of strange that Graham would be having this conversation with Hugh Hewitt and not once bring up McCain's role in it. It's just very interesting to see how that's going to play out as it moves forward. The second thing, of course, Lindsey Graham is a neocon, and of course he's talking about the fact that we have a plan to destroy the regime in North Korea, take down the regime, decapitate the regime, or whatever. Whoop-de-doo. Of course we've got a plan. We've got a plan to blow up everybody if it comes to that. So they're sitting there talking about all the options that we have, to take down the regime in North Korea. But the thing that Lindsey Graham never really talks about is, what do you do after that? Because there's some very good questions that Hugh Hewitt never asked. Such as the fact that North Korea has about 6,500 missiles that we know about aimed at Seoul. There are about 25 million people in Seoul. So the question is, if you do decide to use air power and missiles to hit the regime in North Korea, what plan do you have? First question will be, how long do you think it will take to completely take out his military, his missiles, his missile capability? How long do you think that will take? And how many South Koreans do you think will die in the process? Is it going to take you a couple of days, a couple of weeks? Because 6,500 missiles, not to mention the fact that he's got a couple of atomic bombs, these are factors you have to consider. The idea that you're going to hit Kim Jong-un and he's not going to retaliate, and you're not going to have an awful lot of dead South Koreans. I'm talking in the hundreds of thousands, and if we're talking about him using an atomic weapon, maybe 1 million or more. What's your plan for that, Lindsey? Here's another thing. The North Korean people have been taught to believe that the worst thing they could ever be is taken over by a foreign power or be prisoners or anything like that. They've been told all these horrible things will happen to them, and they've been told that they're better off dead than to be captured. And the same thing was told to the Japanese. And during World War II, when we were going through the South Pacific, and we were taking back, after the Battle of Midway, and we began taking back a lot of those islands, Wake Island and places like that, all throughout the South Pacific, American Marines were witnessing Japanese people committing suicide, pushing their children and their animals off of cliffs and then jumping after them, killing themselves because they were told the same thing, that they would undergo this horrible torture and treatment by the Americans if they allowed themselves to be taken over or captured. The same has been done in North Korea. So, the idea that North Korean people are going to welcome a regime change in North Korea is insanity. They are going to resist, and there's 25 million of them. What is your plan, Lindsey Graham, for how to deal with the 25 million North Koreans who probably are not going to surrender? They are probably going to fight to the very last man. How many tens of millions of North Koreans would you be willing to kill, Lindsey Graham, in order to do that regime change? Here's another question, Lindsey. What if Kim Jong-un decides not to give you a clean little air war? What if he decides not to allow you just to hit him with missiles and planes and knock out his nuclear facilities, assuming you even know where they all are and assuming you can even get to them? What makes you think he's going to let you have a clean little air war like that? Because I believe that the very first thing that Kim Jong-un would do, and any types of hostilities that would break out, any type of missiles that would be launched on him, I think he would send 200,000 to 300,000 North Korean soldiers across the DMZ into South Korea, and they would start the war, the ground war. So my question to Lindsey Graham is, certainly you're not just going to do this air attack and not have any plan for a follow-up of a ground invasion, or at least ways have enough troops on support on ships close to Seoul where you could get them ashore in a few hours, along with all the material and supplies and equipment that they need to help fend off 2 to 300,000 North Koreans coming across the DMZ. What is your plan for that, Lindsey Graham? Because I can almost assure you that Kim Jong-un is going to send a couple 100,000 troops across the DMZ. It is going to be a ground war. He's not going to give you a clean little air war. He's going to force you to fight him on the ground, where he knows the rubber always meets the road, and where he knows it will be much, much more difficult. So where are you going to get those 100,000 troops? How are you going to get them there? Where are you going to station them? They're going to be floating around somewhere out there waiting? Because you better have them troops ready to go, because if you launch those airstrikes and Kim Jong-un does send 2 to 300,000 troops across the DMZ, you better have you better have at least 100,000 American troops ready to hit the shore in 2 to 4 hours to provide support, because it won't take long for 2 to 300,000 North Koreans to raise the city of Seoul and to kill tens of thousands and to put you into a really, really bad situation, an urban warfare environment where you can't just do airstrikes and things like that, because you'll have too many North and South Koreans mixed in all throughout the city. You'll have a very tough time bombing the hell out of North Koreans without killing a lot of South Koreans. So these are things to think about. And also, what's your follow-up plan for the millions of refugees? Could be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 million refugees, North Korean refugees, that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to feed them and take care of them. And what comes next? You see, these are all the questions that should be asked that are not being asked. You know, to sit here and have a conversation about, you know, can we decapitate the regime? Well, of course we can. That's a no-brainer. Obviously, we could level North Korea. We could nuke them, obviously. We could level them with conventional weapons in 30 days. But the issue that you have is you don't have that kind of time. How many South Korean casualties are you willing to take? How many Japanese casualties are you ready to take? And what is your follow-up plan? What do you do with the refugee crisis? What do you do if they storm across the border and drag you and pull you into a ground war? Where are you going to get the 100,000 troops minimum that you're going to need just for the initial operation? Not to mention the follow-up troops, not to mention the support troops, and you typically need 3 support troops for every combat soldier. That's 300,000 troops. If you want 100,000 fighters, you need 300,000 troops. You need 200,000 in support. So these are questions that Hugh did not ask Lindsey Graham. And Lindsey Graham didn't volunteer any of this information. So yes, I have no doubt that we have a plan. And I'm not saying that I am totally opposed to this. If we have a weapon a weapon system that can do the job, that can allow us to decapitate that regime without Kim Jong-un being able to move a lot of troops into South Korea very quickly, or without him being able to launch thousands of missiles into Seoul, and if you have a follow-up plan for what you're going to do with the refugee crisis, if you have answers to all these questions, lay them on me. If they're good answers, I'd say go. I would love to see Kim Jong-un removed. Those people live in horrible conditions. Kim Jong-un is a danger. He is a threat. There's no question about that. But like I said, I think the only real solution, when you look at the questions I've just asked, you come to the same conclusion that you always come to when you talk about this type of a military conflict. You know, it's and I still think the best measure is to make sure that you have an anti-missile system, that if Kim Jong-un ever did decide to launch some sort of an ICBM with a nuke or a bio warhead or a chemical warhead or something like that, that you have a weapons system that can knock them things out of the sky. That is the best solution. Eventually, maybe the Kim regime will collapse. And I think also you would have to have China on board to some extent, certainly South Korea, and obviously Japan. You know, I mean, you don't really want Japan and South Korea having nukes, but it maybe that's the way you have to go. Maybe you have to give South Korea and Japan nukes, or allow them to develop their own. They both are capable of doing that. You work on your anti-defense missile system to protect the homeland. You allow Japan and South Korea to also develop anti-missile systems. You help them with that, and you allow them to develop nuclear ability. I mean, you hate to see it happen, but You know, you hate to see 2 more nuclear powers, but, you know, I mean, that's the world we live in. I still believe the best thing that you can do is to have a defensive system that can knock out their offensive weapons. And until Lindsey Graham and some other people can answer the questions that I've asked about what you do after you launch the missiles and what you think is going, how Kim Jong-un might respond to what we do, and then how you're going to respond to that, until I hear some more in-depth explanations of these things, I simply cannot get on board with the idea of a military strike on North Korea. I need to have these questions answered before I can support it. And so that's my thoughts on the Lindsey Graham interview with Hugh Hewitt. Okay, breaking news today. Seymour Hersh, Cy Hersh, great reporter. No one questions Seymour Hersh's abilities as a reporter. He's a great reporter. He is stating today that he has an FBI source, a high-level FBI source, who has read the file, which they do have at the FBI, on the Seth Rich murder. And he says, according to the forensic analyst, the FBI forensic analyst who looked at Seth Rich's computer, he did in fact have communications with WikiLeaks. He did in fact make arrangements to transfer some sample documents to Assange to take a look at. And assuming Assange liked what he saw, Seth Rich was willing to send him more information, and he would be wanting some money. This is what Seymour Hersh is stating, that his source inside the FBI is telling him that, in fact, Seth Rich was in communication with WikiLeaks and did send some information to him. He also notes that the emails stopped just prior to the transfer of this information stopped just prior to the transfer, just prior to the death of Seth Rich. So that's when all the stuff stopped. Now, Seymour Hersh doesn't buy into the fact that someone from the DNC murdered Rich or whatever. He does believe it was, you know, a robbery gone bad. That's pretty much his position on it, although he says he has no facts on that. That's just his personal opinion of it. But as far as Seth Rich being in contact with WikiLeaks and sending some documents to WikiLeaks, he says that is confirmed according to his source, high-level source at the FBI, who's read the file. And Seymour Hersh is not known as a liar. He is known as a pretty solid reporter, good reporter with a lot of sources. He's been around for a very long time. He has developed a lot of sources. Rarely does Seymour Hersh, rarely is he ever proven to have been lying about something. He usually gets it right. So this will be interesting now that Seymour Hersh has weighed in on the Seth Rich situation. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the media responds, because it's pretty tough to go out there after Seymour Hersh and try to hit him on credibility, because he has more credibility in his pinky than most of these media organizations have in their entire bodies. Next up, Bob Mueller has named his newest member of his posse, the 16th member of his posse, and it's another left-winger. This one is Christina Lelia. She, of course, worked under Eric Holder as Obama's Attorney General. So she worked under Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder, and she's, of course, a Clintonista, obviously. So, hey, that's a perfect 16-0. He's got 16 members of his posse, including his own law firm, which donated over 98% to Hillary Clinton. So now that he's got the full anti-Trump posse in place, we'll see what comes out of it. Next up, Christopher Wray was finally approved today by the Senate overwhelmingly, and so I assume that tomorrow he will probably be sworn in the Oval Office by President Trump as the new FBI director. So we'll be able to see here in the next couple of weeks what Christopher Wray does with things like the surveillance, with things like the leaking, things like the unmasking, or the Russia-Trump thing, or whatever else, the Russia investigation, maybe Seth Rich. We'll be able to see what Christopher Wray is all about We know he's an expert in white-collar crime, and we will see if Christopher Wray decides to take another look, a second look, at the Clinton Foundation, the Hillary Clinton emails, and the destruction of all that government property. We'll learn a lot about Christopher Wray in the next couple of weeks. Okay, Congress has now decided that they've heard enough of the Awan situation, that they don't need to wait any longer. They are calling now for an immediate investigation into Debbie Blabbermouth Do Anything for Hillary Wasserman Schultz. They want to have her now investigated. They want to have hearings in Congress. They want her to testify in front of Congress. Hopefully it will be an open session, and they're even calling on her to resign. So now Congress is not happy with the progress that's being made through the Department of Justice to look into the relationship between Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz and her IT lover boy. So now it appears that they're not going to wait any longer. They want to have their own hearings into this, which is pretty interesting because she's, of course, a member of Congress. They should get her and John McCain there seated at the table side by side, and we could kill two birds with one stone. Two members of Congress that both need to be completely questioned up and down and all around about all the things that they've been involved in over the past year and a half. Okay, this is funny. You know, after Trump let Priebus go and brought in General John Kelly, brought him over from, I guess, what, Department of Homeland Security or what have you, over to be his chief of staff. One of the very first things that Kelly said in his statement right after being sworn in was that he is going to get a handle on the leaking. The funny thing is, less than 4 hours later, before lunchtime, CNN had already done a story citing two sources stating that John Kelly, after Trump had fired Comey, that John Kelly called Comey and told him how bad he felt that Trump had fired him the way he did, and that he was considering resigning in protest over the firing. And allegedly, Comey's response was, no, don't step down, don't do that. You don't have to step down because I got fired. Just go ahead and do your thing. So it's just very funny that John Kelly's coming in saying, yeah, I'm going to get a handle on these leakers. We're going to stop the leaking. And then within a couple hours, a leak comes out about him calling Comey and threatening to resign because he didn't like the fact that Trump fired Comey. Now, I'm not a big fan of Kelly myself. I think he's a deep stater, not a big fan. He is obviously a hardcore military guy, very disciplined guy. I have no doubt that he'll run a more disciplined White House. But whether or not he's got Trump's back or not, I wouldn't bet a penny on it. But it's just funny that he would come out and talk about the fact that he's going to crack down on the leaking, and within a couple hours, this leak comes out about him. That just goes to show you. It just goes to show you how bad it is. Wonder who that leak came from. Who would have known that? Well, we know one person who would have known that. James Comey would have known that. And we know he is a leaker. Yes, we do. Okay, a guy I talk about a lot of time, and not many people mention it because I just really don't like this guy. He's nasty. Ben Rhodes. Well, it appears now that in addition to Samantha Power and Susan Rice and all these other people, they're now looking at Ben Rhodes and considering that possibly he is someone who would have been involved in unmasking names. So it looks like Ben Rhodes is now under the microscope. I wonder if he's included in that little memo that was sent to the Department of Justice of being one of the people they need to talk to. And I would highly suggest that they do, because Ben Rhodes, of course, would be like the number 3 guy in the Obama White House. And he's a nasty guy. He's a dirty player. And I would certainly assume that in regards to the unmasking, he certainly would have been a part of it, certainly would have known about it. So it's very good that we hear that his name is now popped up on the list. We'll find out if any of this actually happens. Remember, they always talk a good game, but actually doing something is something else. And it's something that Krabby Appleton, who made a reference in the comments section about the fact that she thinks that they're all playing on the same team and it's all political theater and that they're not actually going to go after each other. They just pretend, it's like pretend investigations, but they never actually get to the bottom of anything, hold anyone accountable. And I agree 100%. I mean, I've been saying that for a very long time. That's why I was talking about the John McCain situation and whether or not they'll actually have a serious investigation. And if they do have a serious investigation, it can't be done without taking a hard look at Senator Magoo's involvement in the leaking and the dossier itself. And you just get the impression that you're always hearing this tough talk from these people, but you never actually seem to get to the bottom of anything. And I think that's what Krabby was referring to. And so, when they talk about sending this letter to the Department of Justice to look into this and look into that, and now they want to look at Ben Rhodes, yeah, that's all fantastic. I mean, that's great. Talking about it is not great. Doing something about it is great. But all we ever get is to talk. We never get the action. That's what I'm looking for. Action. So as Maura mentioned in one of my previous videos, Jeff Sessions is going to be speaking, giving a speech on Friday. I imagine it's to the press, and I imagine he'll take questions. He's going to be speaking on Friday regarding the leaks. Now, it appears that someone has gotten some information on what he is going to talk about, and it does not look like he's actually going to come out and start and give us a list of people, of names of people who they've busted for leaking and what they're going to do to them. It looks like what's going to happen is he's going to come out and make a statement talking about the fact that they're now in a serious investigation of the leakers and what they plan on doing if and when they catch these leakers, holding them accountable, blah, blah, blah. You know all the tough talk that you're going to get. Same thing with everything else. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Gonna. But they never actually do it. They talk about it, but they never actually do it. So for any of us who are hoping that Jeff Sessions was going to come out and say, yeah, well, we've identified this person, this person, this person. We are going to file charges. We're going to take action, prosecute, whatever. It does not appear that that's what's going to happen Friday in Jeff Sessions' press conference. It appears he's just going to come out and give us some tough talk, tell us what he's going to do if and when he catches these leakers. He's going to prosecute them to the full extent of the law, blah, 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 and nothing ever happens. We'll see, Jeff. We're watching very, very closely here at Towergate. All my subscribers, many other YouTubers, and all of their subscribers. I mean, there's hundreds of us YouTubers. We have, millions and millions of subscribers between all the YouTubers that are out there. We're all talking about this stuff. We've all been talking about this stuff. Read the comments section. Read my comments section on my videos. Read the comments at Styx Hexenheimer. Read H.A. Goodman. Read Molyneux. Read any of these comments sections that you like, and you'll find that everyone has the same feeling about this whole thing. It's always just talk, and they never actually produce. They don't do a damn thing. They can't move forward on the legislative agenda in Congress, and apparently they can't even get to the bottom of who's been doing all these leaks for the past almost year now. It seems like since Trump was president, even before he was president. Still won't find the person that unmasked and leaked the conversation of Mike Flynn. Still haven't found that person. That should have been easy to do. That came from Signal Intelligence. That's a relatively small department. Every single person that comes in and out there has to do a thumb scan and an eye scan. Everything that happens in there is logged in, monitored. It's just nearly impossible for me to believe that they couldn't find the person who unmasked and leaked the Flynn thing. It's just that they don't want to know, or they don't want us to know something. It just, they like to keep, I guess they just believe that they keep talking and wait for time to go by, and other things come up and people forget. It goes into the past. Now it's in the past. It's way in the past. It's way in the past, and then it's forgotten about, because now we have 1,000 new things that have popped up, and they're going to get to the bottom of all that too. but they never do. Frustrating as hell. Now, I did get a chance to watch because as you know, last week or a couple videos ago, I mentioned that Mr. Shopa had put a link there where you could check out the Congress recorder reading the document that was sent to the State Department or the Justice Department to request that they get special prosecutors to look into the Clinton Foundation and the email scandal and Comey and Lynch and obstruction and all these things. And but there was quite a few different members of Congress that gave little 5-minute speeches along with that, which was not included in the video because it was like, as Mr. Shopa said, a couple hours long. But there is some clips that are really good. If you get a chance to watch the clip of Steve King, it's a very good clip. And I actually like Steve King. He's probably one of the good guys. But Steve King, he threw a name in there that no one else has dropped. So he's calling for investigations into all these people, and he's naming them. He's saying, yeah, we need to investigate Obama, Clinton, Comey, Lynch, and then he drops the name Soros. He said he's just come back from Macedonia, and he's been getting an earful about the problems they have with Soros's involvement in political things in their country. And of course, he's involved in the politics in countries all around the world, especially in Europe. But you didn't think he was involved in Macedonia, but he is. He's involved here. And of course, we know that Senator Magoo has a relationship with Mr. Soros, as does Hillary Clinton. And you know, McCain has a good relationship with Hillary Clinton as well. So Hillary Clinton, Soros, Magoo, they probably all sit around and talk. No question in my mind. And Soros is a big funds a couple of John McCain's organizations that he disassociates himself from. So anyway, very interesting to hear about that. It's funny to see Steve King drop Soros because you don't hear many members of Congress talking about these investigations. You hardly ever hear them drop the name Soros, but he's behind so much of it, and we all know it. But that vote on whether or not to have the special counsel appointed to look into all these things, the final vote tally on that was 16 for, 13 against. You can assume it was 16 Republicans for and 13 Republicans or Democrats against, would be my guess. And one last thing I wanted to talk about, that's something I not so much on any threads or any comments on my videos, but on threads on another video I was reading where some people were talking about the fact that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that they recovered these hard drives, and of course we know the Hillary Clinton hard drives and the phones and things that were smashed with hammers, and people talking about, yeah, well, they'll never get this information or whatever. But you know, for those of you who don't know, I do have a degree in computer science. And I remember during one of our classes, we were talking about recovery. And our teacher, who actually worked he was teaching at night, but in the daytime, he was the security tech for the local court system here where I live in Ohio. He's the Hamilton County computer security tech at the court, for the court system. And so he deals with a lot of security issues, and he has a master's degree in computer science and things like that. And I remember we got into the discussion one night about damage to hard drives and how you can destroy hard drives, because we were talking about how you can do that, how you can erase hard drives and this type of stuff. And I remember in that class he said, there's really no way to completely eliminate data off of a hard drive. He said, and he was talking about just knowing from criminal investigations and knowing people through the court system and stuff, that they occasionally will run into a situation where they have, like he said, there was a situation where they had a fire, and it was a suspicious fire, and there was people killed in the fire. It was a house fire, and they wanted to get information, and they had 2 computers in the home, and they wanted to get information. They thought there might be some information that might help them that would have been on the computers. And so he said that there's actually 2 firms in the United States. They almost exclusively work for the government, specifically the FBI, because the type of work they do is very, very, very expensive. Very expensive. And you can give them a hard drive, And remember, there's only these two companies that apparently that do this, or at least at the time when I was going through school, that's what he told us. And they're out in California, both of them. He said that you can give them a hard drive that's been practically melted in a fire, and they can recover a lot of the data from it. They can recover the data and rebuild the hard drive essentially onto another hard drive, even if it's been practically melted in a fire. He also told us that you can beat on them with hammers, you can run bleach bit, you can do all these various things, but he said there are two companies that have the ability. If you've got the money, they have the ability. It's time consuming, takes a long time to do, to recover the data and rebuild it onto another hard drive. But he said they do have the capability to do that. It's hardly ever done because, again, the cost of it, and it's usually the FBI or the government that will use these two companies. They're essentially government contractors. They essentially do almost exclusively work for governments. And in this particular case, they analyzed two hard drives that were burned up, melted in a fire, and they recovered the data. So the idea that you can completely destroy these hard drives is apparently not true, from what I learned when I was in school. And something else about the Hillary Clinton, people still talking about, well, what about she had 60,000 emails she deleted, they used BleachBit and deleted half of those. Well, I don't know where this got lost in the overall conversation, but all those emails have essentially been recovered. Whether or not they've gone through them and looked at them, we don't know. But as it turned out, this company, Platte River, that was holding those emails and did the bleach bidding there, apparently they themselves had a company that they backed up their data with. So Platte River was a backup company to back up your data, but they had their own company they used to back up that data. So they did bleach bit and destroy all these emails. Mr. Combetta, Stone Tier, did all that, but what they later found out was that this company, Platte River, they had a company they used that they backed up all their data with. And that company had all 60,000 or 65,000 of these emails. They had it all. And now the Congress has it all. The FBI has it all. Whether or not they've looked at it, I don't know. But anyway, just, my thoughts on that. So anyway, that's basically what we have going on for today. Wednesday, day 150 Towergate, August the 2nd, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll be back with you tomorrow, and we'll see what shoe drops next. You all take care. Bye.